Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to the 2021 International Association of Genocide Scholars Conference. We are thrilled to have so many wonderful speakers lined up for the next 5 days, and already had a wonderful set of sessions this morning that have started us off in a great way. I know everyone is disappointed that we're in a virtual format. Unfortunately, the realities of COVID made it impossible to have an in-person conference in Barcelona, Spain, which was our original intention. However, the great news is, for those who don't know, that the 2023 conference will be in Barcelona as originally planned. And we now have veteran folks from Barcelona who have been crucial in organizing the 2021 conference, who will take up the reins in organizing the 2023 conference. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in Barcelona in 2 years. And we will as hard as our topic of study is, I hope we can enjoy each other's company and take good encouragement from the work that others are doing. I did want to quickly recognize, before we begin, our conference committee, the people who have worked absolutely tirelessly for many months and beyond to bring this conference to you, especially through the difficult transition from a planned in-person conference to an online conference, and all the work that's gone on with that. We have our two conference committee chairs, Elisenda Calvert-Martinez and from the University of Barcelona, and Armin Marsubian, the first vice president of IAGS. We also have other members: Aitor Diaz, Naomi Morel Alcina, Rosa Ana Alija Fernandez, Sarah Seismiller, Mark Sherman, Sarah Brown, and myself. And we're all excited about the final product. I would also like to take a quick moment before I introduce our esteemed speaker to announce the winners of 2 IAGS prizes that are given at the conferences each time around. First, I'd like to announce the winner of the Early Career Emerging Scholar Prize. This is Dr. Ronan Lee, who is currently at Queen Mary University of London doing work with the International State Crime Initiative. Dr. Lee has done absolutely tremendous work in addressing and calling attention to and analyzing the genocide of the Rohingya in Myanmar. He has already published an important book through IB Tauris called Myanmar's Rohingya Genocide: Identity, History, and Hate Speech, but has also been doing a tremendous amount of work within media and public policy circles, not only to call attention to this issue, but to mobilize action to try to stop what's happening and address what's already happened. We at IAGS are incredibly honored and excited that he has been awarded this prize, and wish him the best as he does this important work. Second, we have a name that is probably quite familiar to many of you. Our Lifetime Achievement Award winner for 2021 is Dr. Helen Jarvis. She is an absolutely crucial person in the many decades of work to address the Cambodian genocide, as well as having an important role in addressing the Bangladesh genocide as well. I cannot even begin to go into all of her accomplishments. Her wonderful nomination from Dr. Greg Stanton and the letters of support from a number of colleagues were just an absolute testament, not only to her incredible intellectual gifts and political impact, but also to her warm humanity. I had the great honor of working with her in organizing the 2019 IAGS conference in Phnom Penh. She was absolutely central in that effort and was crucial to the tremendous success, along with Teresa DeLangis, Alex Hinton, Adam Mueller, and Greg Stanton, who are all on that committee. She really has done so much in the world in the field of genocide studies, but also in addressing genocide in the very human as well as political and legal ways that it needs to be addressed. I cannot tell you how thrilled we are to bestow this honor on her, and how excited to recognize her amazing achievements and selfless devotion to the victims of genocide and to those who are working as scholars and activists on their behalf. With that said, I would like to turn our attention to our current speaker. I am incredibly excited to introduce the recently appointed Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide at the United Nations, Alice Wermeru Nderitu, who has already emerged as an absolute beacon of leadership and commitment in the struggle to prevent genocide and intervene against situations that are already genocidal or have that clear potential. She is someone who has had a tremendous voice in the field of peace building and violence prevention, and has led important processes of reconciliation across communities in her country of Kenya, as well as in other African settings. She was commissioner of the National Cohesion and Integration Commission in Kenya in 2009 through 2013, and is founding member and co-chair of the Uwiano Platform for Peace in Kenya as well. She is a founder of the Community Voices for Peace and Pluralism, a network of African women professionals preventing, transforming, and solving violent ethnic, racial, and religious conflicts worldwide. Her accolades and her achievements go on and on, but I would like to say in a more personal way how thrilled I am that she is in this absolutely crucial position in the UN. Already in a number of interactions over the last few months, I have just been tremendously impressed by what Ms. Nderitu brings to the table, not just in terms of her understanding of mass violence and what's needed to prevent it, but also the complex political landscape in which her work is taking place, and the very human commitment that she shows in her work. We have already begun a process of connecting more strongly the UN office and IAGS, and are looking forward to tremendous levels of collaboration as we go forward under the new leadership of IAGS, specifically under Mel O'Brien, who was recently elected and will take over as president through the process of this conference. Very excited. I could go on singing the praises of Alice, but I would like to turn the floor over to her. We are so excited to have you here, so honored that you're appearing at this conference, and so enthusiastic about working with you going forward. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate the warm welcome, and so really touched and moved by the warm welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, first I'd like to begin by congratulating Dr. Jarvis, who we've read and who has been named as the Lifetime Achiever. And it's a pleasant surprise to hear that this morning. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank the organizers of this International Association of Genocide Scholars for inviting me to this conference. And I would like to tell you how at home that we in our office feel among you. I'm not here alone. I'm here with some of my colleagues, Denise, who's been organizing everything around this conference. We have Jamie too, Jamie Skoda. We have Maria Westergren. They are all here today, and I would like to appreciate them and also say that, yes, we do feel very appreciated to be here. So it's my pleasure to be with you today at this virtual event on genocide and its prevention in the digital age, 21st century challenges. And I must say that I do wish we could meet in person, but of course I understand why we cannot, and I look forward to when we can all finally meet in person. So this topic is timely and one that is high on my agenda as the United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. So many of us now live in societies dominated by digital technology, which influences attitudes, prejudices, and also our capacities for action, while shaping our world and our understanding of its cultural, ethnic, and religious diversity. So as many of you will know, the mandate of my office was created as a result of the failures of the United Nations and the international community to prevent and respond to the genocides in Rwanda and Srebrenica in 1994 and 1995. This mandate is to monitor and raise alarm as necessary to the United Nations Secretary General, to the Security Council, to member states, and to other relevant actors of risk factors of genocide and related atrocity crimes. My office is also to provide recommendations, advice, and support towards the prevention of these crimes. So allow me from the outset to start off by speaking about concerns that led me to visit Bosnia and Herzegovina last month. These concerns are around persistent patterns of denial of the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, glorification of war criminals, hate speech, and rhetoric of division. My engagement was broad and I traveled extensively around the country. I saw an unwillingness and or inability of the high-level leadership to gently address trust and reconciliation deficits. For example, repeated denials by some leaders of facts established by the courts that a genocide occurred in Srebrenica continue to contribute to the undermining of the rule of law. Ensuring in time an intergenerational transmission of prejudice, which translates when one has power into discrimination. I met the mothers of Srebrenica and I promised them that I would talk about this. I also witnessed a lot of bridge building work, bringing people together in local communities, work in great need of digital visibility and support from all of us. I'm therefore raising concerns to you, distinguished scholars, on an absence of sufficient and coherent international attention to risks related to gaps in trust building reconciliation amplified by the genocide deniers in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is especially so as regards the potential adoption of a genocide and war crimes denial law. We need to research and publicize current gaps on trust building in Bosnia and Herzegovina at the highest political level, the benefits of inter and intra-communal cooperation, connecting positive community efforts with constructive high political level actors, and initiatives to address deficits in education, addressing of accountability gaps, as well as continued denial of atrocity crimes. I do believe we need more books like Denying History, this book written by Michael Shermer and Alex Grobman, in reference to the Holocaust. It's titled, Who Says the Holocaust Never Happened and Why Do They Say It? We do need those kind of books for Rwanda and Srebrenica. We need a lot of information focusing on those who say that the genocides did not happen and focusing on what their motives are. And then we need to put that out as often as possible because that narrative is not getting out as often as it should. So I must come back now to the specific theme of this conference, genocide and its prevention in the digital age, 21st century challenges. And by saying that the request by the Srebrenica Memorial Center to receive a copy of the International Criminal Tribunal of the former Yugoslavia's digital archives. This would add to the considerable progress made in digital memorization with interactive virtual Holocaust and genocide museums now available, making the details of the Holocaust and the Rwanda and the Srebrenica genocides accessible to many more people. Now, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres While giving the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture in 2020, identified two seismic shifts that will shape the 21st century while widening inequalities even further: the climate crisis and digital transformation. Pointing to the heavily male-dominated tech industry, he expressed concern that tech and innovation hubs are missing out on half the world's expertise and perspectives, using algorithms that could entrench gender and racial discrimination. Pointing out that education and digital technology must be two great enablers and equalizers, he predicted that the digital revolution and artificial intelligence would change us in ways we cannot imagine today. The UN launched a roadmap for digital cooperation in 2020 that aspires to connect the 4 billion people not on the internet by 2030. We must therefore, in preventing genocide, keep in mind the knowledge of the far wider use of the internet in the developed world as compared to least developed countries. In so doing, we can ask of ourselves, how do we ensure that prioritization in digital literacy and infrastructure works hand in hand with building knowledge and skills on the prevention of genocide, especially in communities at risk? So much research points at atrocities happening within local communities. How we play the role in building digital competencies in preventing violence, addressing its impact, and building safer futures counts for much in regard to prevention. An examination of any armed conflict in the world in the last few decades points at civilians as the primary target. We need innovative digital community-based solutions, building resilience at the local level, and reinforcing the leadership and ingenuity of local communities in prevention. Supporting communities in the use of media technology such as mobile phones, the internet, and digital video to promote social justice is crucial, and I will explain why as I continue speaking. So we must do so within certain realities. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, I saw firsthand in many parts of Africa how hard people tried to get onto the global online meetings. With no electricity, the digital divide is real. I saw spaces to engage regularly closing down for communities with limited access to infrastructure to enable technology. We must enable participation of those without access to technology as decisions continue to be made digitally for and on their behalf in which they cannot participate. So millions of voices of rural and peri-urban people are missing in these digitally enabled conversations. We know too that the pandemic has interrupted regular activities and growing appreciation for locally led prevention of atrocities. Amid growing appreciation for locally led prevention of atrocities. How then do we ensure that we link the information that we have on early warning on the prevention of atrocities to early response when digital knowledge is coded, programs, operating systems, and apps are created? We must look at equipping local people working to prevent atrocities in communities at risk with technological tools, digital support, knowledge, and resources to adapt their work in this changed global dynamic. We can, for instance, support use of technology such as WhatsApp, available to people without access to the internet, to provide not only counseling in conflict and post-conflict societies, but also to hold dialogues, intercommunal dialogues. We successfully, with a group of women, held several intercommunal dialogues through WhatsApp sessions, and this can be done. So distinguished scholars, we've come a long way since the Simon Wiesenthal Center declared in 1995 that at the time there was only one website inciting racial hatred. In 2002, the center noted that these websites had risen to 3,300. In 2021, we can no longer keep count within a current digital context that provides for the flourishing and destructive appeal of anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, ethnicism, and hate speech. So the Secretary General in June 2019 launched the UN Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech with my office, the UN Office on Genocide Prevention and the Responsibility to Protect, as a UN focal point on the implementation of the UN Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech. Our office coordinates system-wide efforts to counter and address hate speech, including by supporting UN field presences, member states, and civil society at national and community levels. So one of the commitments of the strategy is to use new technologies and engage with social media to address online hate speech. In this regard, my office engages with tech and social media companies to promote policies and practices related to hate speech that are in line with international human rights standards and the UN strategy, and work together to tackle this phenomenon. While social media companies have begun to regulate hate speech on their platforms, regulation is not consistent across board and may also be subject to national legislation on hate speech. So some key challenges requiring substantive research include what to do when hate speech does not reach the threat of incitement, and the vagueness of the definition of hate speech as a concept for which no international standard exists. Based on the experience of my office, as well as based on the experience of my office, as well as an extensive research of processes leading up to the commission of atrocity crimes, my office has set out the most common risk factors and their indicators in a framework of analysis that would be familiar to many of you. So risk factors and the means and the magnitude in which they can proliferate in our societies are constantly changing. For instance, we now see far-right extremists joining school boards to influence curriculums. New technologies have brought immense benefits, connecting people across the globe and making information more accessible. However, they have also been used to target vulnerable populations and human rights defenders, for example, through online surveillance. In addition, new technologies, in particular social media, has resulted in a firestorm of online incitement and hate speech, leading to discrimination, division, and violence in many societies. We repeatedly see social media being used to disseminate such hateful narratives against vulnerable populations, including against ethnic and religious minorities, indigenous people, refugees and migrants, women, LGBTI communities, and others, often for political gain. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated existing trends of hate speech that scapegoat and stigmatize individuals or groups along identity lines, specifically religious lines, and ethnic and religious lines. By addressing this divisive and harmful language targeting populations on the basis of identity, we can avoid escalation of tensions that could spill over into violence. There is need for more research on digital frameworks for prevention of genocide, based on both a long-term approach in regard to ensuring armed conflict does not happen or is de-escalated, as well as approaches aimed at prevention in the absence of trust or in the presence of negative peace. We also need research on the implications for transitional justice, as local communities rely for justice for high-level perpetrators, for bringing high-level perpetrators to justice from international courts as local-level perpetrators walk free. We need disaggregated data on thematic or country-specific hate speech and racial or ethnic discrimination in social media. We need specific case studies on how incendiary rhetoric and hate speech on social media fits into underlying sectarian tensions, bad economic conditions, and unemployment, therefore contributing to atrocity crimes. We need to know more on how to inform educational curriculum on digital methods of prevention of genocide. We've needed, from the very beginning, effective ways to counter hate narratives online. We do need programs to document evidence, nature, and forms of identity-based digital stigma. We do need to document and to create awareness of evidence of good legislative practice in prevention of genocide and in countering discriminatory attitudes and hate speech. We also do need to do quite a bit of research on how to counter extremist candidates digitally, extremist candidates who run for and who are winning elections, as we have seen. We also need to do quite a bit more on forgotten conflicts, what I call forgotten conflicts, conflicts in West Papua, identity conflicts that have gone on for a very long time. West Papua, Mindanao, South Kordofan, Blue Nile, places where people have begun to take these conflicts for granted, and of course on Syria. And I'll say a bit more about that as we move on. So, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to finding solutions to address the negative consequences of new technologies and social media, It is equally important to understand and harness the benefits of these tools, such as connecting people across the globe and making information more accessible. This access to information has allowed communities to mobilize and take action to prevent escalation of tension, as well as to raise alarm when risk factors of atrocity crimes are present. New technologies have also been crucial in the documentation of atrocity crimes, from individuals using cameras on their mobile phones to satellite imagery that plays an important role in holding perpetrators accountable and in mobilizing action to prevent further atrocity crimes from being committed. In Syria, human rights violations and abuses perpetrated in the conflict have reached the world through the bravery of individual documentation. My office issued a statement in March marking the 10th anniversary of this conflict, reminding the Security Council in particular to take action required to protect the people of Syria. It's instructive that since the beginning of this conflict, my office has issued 19 statements on this particular conflict. These atrocities that are being brought to us through the bravery of individual documentation are atrocities that might otherwise be hidden or denied by the perpetrators. So likewise in Myanmar during the 2017 violence against the Rohingya, and recently during the brutal crackdown of protesters by the military, individuals documented the violence, raised alarm, and urged for action to be taken. This documentation is crucial to hold perpetrators accountable in the future. My office and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights with High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet, we issued a statement in which we asked for, among others, responsibility to protect, enforcement in Myanmar. New technologies, including artificial intelligence and virtual reality, are also being utilized to preserve the stories and accounts of past victims of atrocity crimes for memorialization, education, and to promote prevention. I must say too that about Syria, that we have also called consistently. Our position has been that responsibility to protect has been needed. And when I speak about responsibility to protect, I'm speaking about it in the entirety of all its three pillars and all the ways that it can be used to support countries in conflict or countries that need international help that go beyond the military intervention. I must say that in Yemen also, that we have increasing concern about the protection situation of civilians as the conflict continues in the absence of nationwide ceasefire. In Afghanistan, we are concerned and looking at what's going on in regard to reports of attacks and targeting of minority communities, such as the Hazara. In Ethiopia, we continue to raise concern and alarm over reports of ethnic and religious tensions, hate speech, incitement to violence, and allegations of human rights violations and abuses, including killings, rape, displacement of populations, and destruction of property. The Central African Republic as well, we've witnessed increasing human rights violations, targeted violence against communities, and forced displacement of civilians committed by armed groups, government forces, and bilaterally deployed security personnel, which could contribute to the risk of atrocity crimes. We're also looking at the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, where armed groups and intercommunal violence continues to threaten populations in the eastern provinces. In South Sudan as well, we've been advocating for accountability for atrocity crimes committed and for the implementation of transitional justice measures continued in the peace agreement, especially for the hybrid court for South Sudan, which needs quick operationalization in coordination with the African Union. I must say that there are so many important tools that I believe need to be supported and strengthened to ensure that our efforts to prevent atrocity crimes respond to the realities facing populations at risk today. And my final request, distinguished scholars, is that in a world connected more than ever through technological advances, is for digital methods of advocacy to help states fulfill their responsibility to prevent genocide and protect their citizens by advocating for the universal ratification of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. I look forward to learning more from the vast range of papers that are being presented today and throughout this conference on other ways in which new technologies can be used to advance genocide prevention and ways in which we can work together in this regard. I do hope I have the space for questions and answers, and I thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Special Advisor Nderitu, for your very important remarks today. I think you've set an agenda for the coming years that touches on incredibly central issues, many of which are going to be discussed in detail by scholars at the conference. I can't tell you how enthusiastically, at least I am embracing the topics that you're calling us to attend to. But I also very much appreciate the sophistication of your approach, your advocacy for research-based prevention, and your sophisticated approach to transitional justice and peace building. Your focus on gender and other types of issues that we know have a tremendous impact on the issues that we're trying to address, really are setting a tone and giving us a framework that is going to be very important in translating the great work of scholars in this association into truly practical impacts in the world, which is what we strive for. So thank you so much for being, for sharing your vision, for being a leader in the way that you are, and really encouraging us as we face, such a set of challenges. With that, we actually have a good amount of time for question and answers. Audience members can post questions. I will see them and can pass them on to the special advisor. So please feel free to post things, and we'll go from there. I can start things rolling actually with one question that has been a particular issue in the United States and certain other societies that tend to have a negative freedom concept. That is a notion of freedom that basically maximizes individual rights without necessarily a balancing focus on protection of others in the society. And particularly looking at the challenges of hate speech on the internet through the electronic media that we have now that transform what used to be a much more difficult process of disseminating odious views into something that an individual can do in a few moments, reaching thousands, if not millions of people through the internet. The way laws are set up in many societies and the ways that people view this issue, there is often a great reluctance to intervene against, all sorts of hate speech. How do you address that problem? What's your vision for addressing that problem? And how do you speak to people who are worried that restrictions on against hate speech that would directly contribute to preventing genocide and other mass violence are somehow violations of their individual freedom or the individual freedoms that they wish to protect?
Well, thank you. That's something that worries us quite a great deal because, as is often expressed to us, that there is a very thin line between freedom of expression and hate speech. And I would say this, especially the question you've asked, I would specifically speak to hate speech because we have quite a lot of things that are said that are clearly incitement to violence in some context, but in some contexts, in some countries, people feel very strongly that you cannot interfere with the freedom of expression. So much relies on in individual national governments to put in place measures to ensure that they are able to stem these kind of things. And we have very good examples from quite a number of countries around the world that have been able to differentiate between hate speech and freedom of expression. And part of the discussions we've been having with tech and social media companies have actually been around this. Like, what do you do? At what point do you cross over from hate speech? Where do you cross over from? What do you need to do to know that you're crossing over to hate speech? So usually what we are doing with the tech and social media companies is that we have guidelines for them that they use, which we can share with you in the chat box. And so that then you can see what they look at in terms of, for example, deciding that a post is defamatory, is reaching to incitement to violence. So in the absence of laws, or in the absence of political will, then I must say that there are quite a number of instances where we've worked with tech and social media companies, pointing out things that are being said in specific places, and they've been able to bring that down. They've been able to bring down posts that have said those kind of things. But also, I watched the British Prime Minister just I think a day or two ago, talking about what he's going to do around the hate speech that and the racism against the footballers, the black footballers, that was put out against those black footballers. And I must say, like, that's the kind of action that we would require from heads of government, that so much is expected of us to do, but really heads of government also need to be able to step in and do something about the situation in their countries. I'm sorry, I don't hear you.
Quick mic problem. Thank you so much for that important answer. And this is obviously a problem that has been discussed for hundreds of years, actually, related to such issues. And your approach is really important, and certainly has the potential to really impact this. So thank you so much. We have other questions that have come in, so let me pass on the first one. And this is more on a personal note. What problems do you personally face in the role that you have now with the UN? What are the challenges that are coming up for you in that role?
What problems do I personally face? I must say that in this role, okay, I had to relocate. So of course that means a whole change of everything. But beyond that, I have come into a very supportive environment. I found a great team that has been working on issues on prevention of genocide for a long time, and very vast with things that are going on around the world. And I would say that at a personal level, my problems remain, my challenge really, not my problem. My challenge remains that there are so many expectations of what I can do while I'm in this position. And I keep on talking about how I haven't changed my phone number, so I keep getting all these phone calls from people I've worked with on the ground, people telling me that we are going to be attacked, and then expecting me to quickly mobilize rapid response and stop the attacks from happening tomorrow or in an hour's time. And then what then that means in terms of that mobilization, and in terms of and getting out that information in a way that is evidence-based, the bureaucracy of getting that kind of information out, I think that would be my greatest personal challenge. That I wish I had my own response system that would immediately get out and stop all these conflicts from all these people who keep calling me and telling me we are going to be attacked. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. And I can only imagine the burden that you carry being in essence the most prominent person on genocide prevention and intervention in the world, in a world that does not have many mechanisms for this, which national governments, for instance, are not helpful in this regard, and essentially the entire globe is looking to you to solve problems that obviously would take a resolve across the globe to solve. So I can only imagine how both overwhelming but also heartbreaking at times that is, to know the limits of what you can do and what the UN, even if you can mobilize the UN, what it can do. So thank you for sharing that and giving us insight into that challenge and the others that you face. We have another question, and this actually connects well to that, which is, have you seen progress in terms of how the UN is advancing and enforcing a culture of prevention against genocide, particularly among powerful international players? I think we might say, for instance, the Permanent Five on the Security Council, but also other global political forces that can have a huge impact in preventing genocide or not. And I wonder if you can address that.
Yes, of course. I think in the speech, as I was speaking, I talked about Syria, in that we issued a statement commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Syrian, the conflict going on in Syria, and that we call upon the Security Council to ensure that it steps up to its role to ensure that it stops this conflict. So those who are familiar with the way the UN works know that, for example, I raise alarm to the Secretary General and to the Security Council, and then the Security Council then takes action. So of course, I have seen quite a bit of that. There are usually quite a number of issues involved at stake, and we've seen, like, on a number of occasions, the Security Council has been divided and hasn't come together as single-mindedly as they did when they were creating this office. Because if you remember, when this office was created after the Rwandan and Srebrenica genocide, the entire world, all the member states and the Security Council came together and agreed, all of them, with nobody questioning anything, and said, we do need to have an office of prevention, of the special advisor on the prevention of genocide. So that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that answer as well. Our next question gets much more specific, and it asks what your office is doing currently about the ongoing atrocities in Ethiopia's Tigray region. And is this a focus of concern for your office? And if so, how are you addressing it?
Yes, it is. I think we were one of the first offices to issue a statement regarding the concern in Ethiopia of ethnic violence in Ethiopia and the allegations of serious violations, especially in Tigray. We have spoken often that for Ethiopia, we need to watch Tigray, but Tigray as symbolic of what could then happen to the whole country. And so not just me, but the Secretary General has issued many statements and worked very hard to alleviate the humanitarian situation. And we know that right now the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has a team on the ground investigating what's going on. And we are waiting for that team. We work together very closely, and we're waiting for the team to complete its investigations, and then we will see in what way we need to move forward as regarding Tigray. But I can tell the person who's asked that question that Tigray is always on my mind all the time. Like, think about it all the time. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much for that important response. We have a much broader pair of questions coming, so I'll ask the first one. Has there or are there now any discussions about revising the Genocide Convention? As you're probably aware, since actually its drafting and passage, scholars have raised certain kinds of concerns. For instance, although this has changed in the case law, the exclusion of gender groups, for instance, from the convention, the exclusion of political groups, but other issues as well, the difficulty of proving the kind of intent that seems to be what the Genocide Convention requires for something to be determined to be genocide and so forth. But there are many other issues as well. I'm sure you're more than aware of them. Are there any discussions like that? Are there any pitfalls to opening up that question? What's your analysis of this?
Quite a number of forums have raised the issue of revising the Genocide Convention, and the ones that I have been part of since I joined office have been those asking for us to revise the Genocide Convention to recognize atrocities that happened before 1948. And there have been quite a bit of that. What I know is that in past instances when this topic has come up, that is not something that has been considered. So, but it's not something that has been moved away, like never to be discussed again, but it's not something that has been considered in the past. So I'm not saying, I'm not promising that we are going to begin discussions about revising the Genocide Convention, but I do think that it's important that people keep expressing their concerns in regards to what it does or does not address.
Thank you so much. That's really really enlightening. A related question comes from someone who prefaces the question with the statement that the UN mechanism of the responsibility to protect has not lived up to its potential. Do you feel that it's become obsolete as a tool against genocide and other mass human rights violations?
No, I don't think so. It has not become obsolete. What it has become is that it has become politicized. So the mechanism of responsibility to protect, what we have seen when speaking to member states is that it's politicized. Nobody has a quarrel with the principle, but a lot of people have problems with its implementation. And often people speak about Libya and what then happened there, and but then people do not speak about where it's worked. And like, for example, my own country, Kenya, the responsibility to protect worked. And there is always the tendency to interpret the responsibility to protect from the third pillar. And the third pillar is the one that speaks of military intervention. But people don't speak about the first two pillars, of the state, the sovereign state protecting its citizens. And then if it doesn't, then we have other ways of supporting the protection of citizens, such as diplomatic and efforts, So it has not become obsolete, but we do need conversations on how to move on, because we seem to be stuck in this space where some member states really feel strongly against it. Some member states feel very strongly for it. And so we are somewhere in the middle. There is some hope in the recently passed resolution on responsibility to protect. 115 member states voted for it. And what I found, as somebody who's been a mediator for many years, what I found most hopeful were the statements of those member states who spoke at great length, quite a number of them asking, but why do we allow this to divide us? Why can't we begin to speak about how responsibility to protect can bring us together again, as we were when we created these two offices of prevention of genocide and responsibility to protect. So the statements of those member states have given us an entry point in terms of how to re-engage the discussions on the responsibility to protect.
Oh, that's thank you so much for that important correction to what a lot of the discourse on R2P is and what it emphasizes. I think you're absolutely right, and it gives us a way to refocus some of the thinking and even maybe recognize that some of the debates about R2P are missing what it actually entails or what it includes. So thank you so much for that. That's super helpful. We have another very specific question. Does your office consider the case of the minority Banyamulenge in Eastern DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, who have been cited in the UN Joint Human Rights Office report out of Kinshasa as being the second group targeted by hate speech in the DRC, as well as being targeted by violence?
Yes, we are. We actually have we have a working group right now that's working with MONUSCO on the issue of DRC and the Banyamulenge specifically. And there, at some point, there was quite a huge outcry about what was happening there as when I came into office. And so we do have a working group that's working consistently on this end of, and the results will soon be out.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's very important. And if I can say, it is impressive how much, and your remarks showed this as well, how sensitive you are to the unfortunate number and specific issues that we're seeing around the world that are very often absent from any kind of public or media discourse. So it is truly important that you're recognizing even where the global community and the big policymakers are not seeing this, how important these issues are. Related to this, we have a question actually connecting to the Ethiopia question we had earlier regarding the Amhara, who the questioner points out are also being quietly massacred. And the questioner wonders if there are any plans for the UN to look into this situation as well.
Yes, there are. When we were issuing the statement as on Ethiopia, it was actually not on Tigray. If you read that statement, it's something that we can post also in the chat box, that it was speaking about the whole of Ethiopia. I have worked in Ethiopia, so I know the country very well. And we pointed out that developments in Ethiopia across board indicate that several risk factors for atrocity crimes exists, and that they do not only exist in Tigray, that they exist in very many parts of the country. And so, yes, we are looking at not just Amhara, but the whole country. And we know that all these long-standing intercommunal tensions in Ethiopia would be products of the Ethiopian history of ethnic federalism, in which all these major ethnic groups administer their own regions. And this has translated into ethnically and religiously motivated violence. And also this growing nationalism sentiment that's been observed in several regions. So yes, Amhara too, we are keeping an eye on Amhara as well, and the whole of Ethiopia.
Thank you for that important statement as well. We have another type of question, very important one. In the United Kingdom, there has recently been, in the context of trade agreements, a discussion on whether naming events as genocide is a political matter appropriate for parliaments and governments and so forth, or whether it is rather a judicial matter that should be reserved for judges and courts. Do you have a view on this issue? And if so, what is it?
I can just say about us, I can speak about us, that about our office, that in regard to qualify situations as genocide or crimes against humanity or war crimes, that we as an office are not in a position to determine whether this whether situations either that happened in the past legally qualify as international crimes of genocide or crimes against humanity and war crimes. So what we do is we make assessments as to whether there is risk of any of those crimes happening in any particular situation. so that we can try and stop them from happening and not happening. So I would not be in a position to be able to speak for the UK government and what their position is.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very sad to say we're near the end of our time together, and I wanted to thank audience members for wonderful questions, important questions, but especially you for Alice for really your insights, your vision, as I mentioned before, and your leadership. Which I think I certainly have found inspiring, and I expect many people with us today have also found inspiring. Again, as challenging and horrific as the issues that we are trying to address are, it is somehow I don't know, motivating to have someone of like you. Really helping us see how to approach the issues and really taking the lead on doing that in such a committed and important way. In the minute that remains, I wonder if you have any closing statement, any closing thoughts you'd like to share with our audience as we go forward, both into the conference and into the work of genocide prevention and addressing past genocides in the future. What is it you want us to take away and think about going forward?
Thank you. I just think that we are speaking about digital spaces this whole week and how important it is to present prevention of genocide as something that is not boring. How do we get millennials to own this message about preventing genocide? How do we get them to create hashtags that people understand risk factors? How do we get them young people to understand that what is happening right now is a risk factor that can be translated into an early action? I think that the imagination of how to do things differently, we kept saying that the pandemic has given us space to imagine things anew. How can we imagine the way we prevent genocide, the way we present the prevention of genocide, so that it becomes things that people talk about all the time and not talk about just in the context of history or in the context of geographical spaces, Srebrenica, Auschwitz, Rwanda. How do we, I don't know whether to use the word exciting, but how do we make, people speak about prevention of genocide in ways that make them understand that it's relevant to them on a daily basis? So that, for me, is something that I would really hope to get out of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, yes, you've opened up the theme of the conference in a really important way, and I know we're all really interested in seeing different scholars begin to address some of the questions that you've just pointed out for us. So thank you so much. I am so sad that we're out of time. But I do hope as the relationship with IAGS goes forward and your work goes forward, that this is the first of a number of future opportunities for us as an organization to work with you. Excited about Mel O'Brien as the new president, who is already very committed to that connection, and look forward to our chance to learn from you and support your work in the future. Thank you so much for being with us. It has truly been an inspiring session.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Much appreciate all of you. Thank you.